learning to listen to the children. So I tease people that I know how to speak baby, but I do, right? You know, and knowing that they talk really early, though we don't always understand it. I had one son who talked really fast, really early, and so it sounded like gibberish, right? But he was very kinetic, and really fast his whole life, so that I realized I had to interpret what he was saying, right? He was actually speaking English to me, and that I had to slow it down and give it back to myself to begin to understand it. And having another child that was speaking words at 3 months, and people were like, I think your baby's talking, right? Right? And, you know, having my girlfriend, Ayanna, your baby spoke a whole sentence, right? And understanding that our children come in different ways with different gifts and bring us a certain level of divine intelligence. And they come knowing. And we see that, you know, those of us that are birth workers do see that. And then working with mothers in the movement and outside the movement and on the fringes of the movement, supporting them in having natural births and finding that work. And we'll talk about that, right? Okay, so I'm going to open myself for questions. My children are almost all grown. Should I open my? Oh, not yet.
Let me say something and then we'll
Mm-hmm.
do that.
Okay. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, they're all grown. I have had the experience of losing my two oldest sons, and one was to asthma, and I really believe that the formula that I was told to give him has helped develop that in him, and worked with him most of his life to change how that had created his response to his environment. And then another son to intercommunal violence. And one of the philosophies I had developed even before I lost him was that we give a lot, we pull all kinds of folks out for, and I'm one of those people that support the work against police violence, but that we still have to figure out a way to let the community know how unacceptable these murders are, whether they are domestic violence or child abuse or murder from guns or knives or beatings, but we have to. And in that, I say that because birth and death are a cycle of life, right? They come at any time in our lives. In that work, I have learned to lead ceremony and open people's support community and opening spiritually wherever we are, right? To calling in the ancestors and aligning ourselves with the elemental forces and the planetary relations or the relations of the planet, which is how I come to call myself a medicine woman. And my formal education is in traditional Chinese medicine and traditional African practices and indigenous-based practices.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and for sharing your beautiful self with us. It's my opinion that you are a treasure in our community. And I want to hear some applause behind that. Our community is indeed a treasure. And we have our beautiful, humble mamas who are here living and teaching and healing, who never get acknowledged for what they do and what they have done. And so I just wanted to have that moment for you and thank you on behalf of the community for all that you've given. and being a mother and being a healer and teacher and just being a blessed being. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And we wanted to give a little token of our affection to you and award you. Our Oakland Better Birth Foundation bestows upon Mama Ayanna Mashama the Good Birth Keeper Award, awarded on this day, June 6, 2016, in recognition of her dedication and her role as educator, advocate, and mentor to Oakland East Bay families.
Thank you. The quote is, "Therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty."
You're very welcome. I want to thank our beautiful artist and new midwife, Patty Garcia, who's the artist who created our certificate. She is not
Beautiful.
here, yes, but she sends her blessings, and that is her artwork.
It's beautiful. And, I mean, each stroke.
Isn't it?
Yes.
I was going to pass around.
I'm gonna, okay, if I pass it around, don't put your fingers in it.
Like a mother.
So I wanted to take a few moments. By the way, I have not introduced myself. I'm Samsara Morgan. I'm the executive director of the Oakland Better Birth Foundation. Thanks again for being here. And I wanted to have Mama share her story with us, and I also wanted to spend a few moments to talk about solutions to the problems that we're both working on. My work is very much focused on empowering mothers as well, and stemming the tide of unnecessary death of mothers and babies during childbirth and early parenting, you know, the first year of life, that critical time when we're losing the most babies, and particularly losing the most African American babies and mamas. So I would love to just talk a little bit about solutions, and then definitely open it up for questions, and then we've got food and partying to do, so we're gonna do that. So just off the top, I want to ask you, what do you feel would be 2 or 3 like real important tools of healing the crisis that we are facing right now?
We have, in terms, you mean the birth crisis?
Yeah,
Birth with our children. Healing. And society. Well, I mean, first we would really have to deal with the scourge of white supremacy and racism, and the oppression of patriarchy, which might seem very big, and it is, but it's not impossible. And I believe I've been given visions that show us overcoming this, right? And in the visions, I believe I've interpreted some of the information, which is to respect and honor the earth, and and nature, and to literally stay connected to it, to call forth those who would oppress us, and reach for their humanity, especially those that are on the ground, that have been conditioned to in the tools of oppression and the use of the tools of oppression. And I mean, we could get intricate with that. I have to say, I am very clearly in support of self-defense, if we need to. That sometimes if you can't reach people through reasoning, that we then have to defend ourselves and our children. That might look like going in with a really strong birth plan, right? And when they're trying to work you away from it, standing firm in it, even if, like they did with me, they send you home from the hospital. We can't have you here, go home. Okay, and then, or training yourselves in the arts of self-defense. And then I believe we have to create really strategic plans around organizing. We may have to conspire in private and build upon trust with each other, and have very strong support networks with people that we trust. Build national and international relationships. So that means if you're Native American, have strong relationships with your people and your practices. If you're Latina or Chicana or African or European, the practices of your people, right? The earth-based indigenous practices that have been suppressed and oppressed and hidden. So looking for hidden knowledge, reclaiming knowledge, and understanding how they would keep us separate from one another. So one of those healings would be fearlessness and fear of being African and of African people and the first peoples, and honoring that in a way that then opens ourselves to the knowledge that those ancient ones left us, knowing that they could see us and what we needed, and reclaiming it and internalizing it and bringing it back out in our daily lifestyles.
Thank you. I wanted to open up this space for anyone who would like to ask a question or share. What we're doing is kind of brainstorming for maybe 10 minutes or so, looking at solutions to the concerns. There's a lot of energy sitting and talking about the problem, and their conferences and their notebooks given out with little, pens and whatnot, and then we stay in the same issue that we're in. So here's an opportunity for somebody with a burning desire to share a solution to what we're talking about. We're talking about, healing on different levels, healing our moms, healing our young ones, living well upon the earth. So, you can be first, and then Liana right after you. You want to come on up?
Please. No, it's okay. I think my voice can carry. Something I've been brainstorming within myself when I find myself in these circles sharing is that a lot of the time we're talking about how can we stop oppression from coming at us, but I think that it is a very big challenge to do that, and it is my opinion or observation that we need to start with the youth and in the homes. And I think a lot of the times the children get caught up outside and they have great minds, and they are looking for a way to use or exercise the skills that they have, natural skills. They're good business people, they're good communicators, they're very social. And I think that if we can start finding out what these children are good at, which is what we really don't do anymore. We're really focused on what the children are good at, what are their natural skills and abilities, and feed those things and give them opportunities to use those skills in a productive way. Entrepreneur skills. If they're out there selling drugs, then they can develop something that they can sell that is productive and lucrative and creative, you know what I'm saying, within themselves. So I think that that's a really major point, that we need to afford opportunities for youth to do exactly what it is that they're great at.
I can tell you how much I agree with everything that you said. One of my critiques of education is that we're trying to fit children in an already established paradigm. And what if your child is that brilliant person that doesn't walk that walk? And so then they end up feeling badly about themselves and feeling that they're inadequate when our children should be coming in, especially now in such a stressful time. Children are coming in quantum leaps ahead of what we're trying to give them. So we need to take a look we need to respect that, first of all, and we need to look at each child. Each child is a brand new story, never told before on the earth. You know, and what would it be if we parented our young people that way and we educated them that way? You know, and then that definitely would require breaking down of white supremacy and capitalism and a lot of ridiculous things, because, you know, we can't have all those people changing things up. You know, some corporations would stop making a lot of money.
I wanted to respond to that too.
And then you're next.
Not only that, we have to understand about learning styles as well. I find that we often, as an educator who went to college to become a teacher, right? From my 4-year degree and on, I was going, and then I found that the way that it was set up, the way that they teach us to educate children is really backward, right? And this whole idea of them sitting still, maybe kindergarten, they get a little movement, right? After that, it's like sit in a desk in a square room for most of the day with about 15 minutes twice in the day, and half an hour, you know, and the food, you know, teaching them around food, I think is an extremely important part of that too, the level of creativity. And most importantly, we may have to, like you said, almost never skip anything, but focus really intensely on the coming generations to begin to change the cultures that are in place. So if we have a movement that is for the ones that are going to be coming out the womb, it may be an amazing, and it probably would be an amazing place to start.
So one of the things that's really come into my scope recently has been education. However, it's not traditional education that we experience in school. What I'm speaking of, and that would be great to work with someone else on, because you can't really do things alone. You have to have a supportive community for you to get anywhere. You can't do things by yourself one place at a time. You know, you need people who have their other skills. So one thing that I would love to try and work towards is bringing education, healthy living, healthy food practices, like what you were speaking about, showing them how they're natural things. And I think it's specifically, I've worked in elementary schools doing like yoga, like working with kids, and I also do a lot of babysitting. I'm not a mother myself, but I absolutely love mothers, and like, you know, I'm very thrilled that there is this society happening in this community that's here. But I think it's a question linked with a comment is, you know, what are ways to bring them into schools? How do we get speakers to happen? How do we get after school programs? How, you know, who are those people? Like, I think it's wonderful to talk about it and start the excitement, but I would love to implement it and to work with people who want to be passionate about it and get a move on it. Like, I think a women's circle would be awesome, but you know, I think it's really important, and we should start now because our world is so toxic. And you know, I see a lot more people who are my age, who are millennials, who want to change the world but don't really know how to, and we need our elders to help us. You know, we don't have all those. Yeah.
One of the things I didn't talk about was Regina Roots, and that's the women's daycare cooperative that we formed. And so while we were putting out magazines around health and well-being and educating the community for free, with very powerful womb affirming art, we also had our daycare collective or cooperative for those of us who were our children, and we did it in two ways. We had working parents pay an affordable fee, and then we worked together. And at the end of the week, we had our circle. So one of the things we did, and that's all of us took a job in the daycare. So like for a while, I was the one that cleaned up while everything closed, because I had a business during the day, and then another period during that time I shopped for the food and cooked lunch for the children during the week. And so each of us took a different role. And my husband at the time we did repairs around the house that we used, and kept it in good repair. And we all worked on lesson plans together and making sure we had the resources that we needed. And on Friday evening, three of us, two of us would stay to clean up and close of us, and three of us would go to the home of the parent that was supporting it. I think there was actually 6 of us. And we would clean the house for her and have food ready and get the children fed and we had an older child watch them, and then we circled up together and we had our healing circle. So that is one way, well-managed way, successful way of doing it. Eventually that daycare collective became a school, which is now an independent Black institution, Ile Omode.
I think that that's really the key. The key is that we have to stop looking at the existing paradigm of how we do things. And that's what I really want to see as a vision for the Oakland Better Birth Foundation. Like, I really want us to pull in folks from the community who have visions like that and say, okay, how can we help make this happen? Like with regard to birth workers, there are many women and folks who want to be birth workers, but they feel like, oh, I have kids, so I can't do it. How can I do it? Well, how have humans always gotten things done? We got together in circles and we helped each other out. So the circle of doulas and birth workers who, if somebody has kids and you've got to go to a birth, we want to make friends with our sister birth workers so that you have enough of a relationship of trust where you can say, I'm running to a birth, here's my baby, here's his book and his diapers, and I'll be back in 10 hours, God willing, right? So how we get this done is to be not so much looking for where the grants are coming from and not at all looking for patriarchy to agree or support what we're going to do. How we need to get it done is to just do it.
Yeah, I agree.
Just do it.
Can I make one more comment?
Go for it.
And this is, really a thanks to you both sitting here and the elders that I see. We, as people of color, really need to see leaders in our own image that we respect. And I think that's another way to solve some of the issues that we have. Is really seeing people doing what we want to do in our own image that we love and respect. So thank you both.
I also think we have to develop processes maybe, or plans, and begin to put things in place for families that are in crisis among our circles. And to also move out of judgment with each other around our crises, right? Or the things that happen as we try to function and survive in white supremacy and patriarchy, right? And oppression, the systems of oppression that are put in place, so that when someone is chemically imbalanced, right, or addicted, or if they're doing so much, their house is out of control, or they are so stressed out that their behavior becomes kind of rude and abrasive, different things, begin to strategize with each other to move in to support one another. Because even now among some, I work with some of the best people I know, incredible minds, very evolved beings, but there are times when the sisters get together and talk about the sister, right? Or I'm sure the brothers do the same thing, or someone asks for help, but we are put off by their behavior based on the level of trauma, the way they're responding to trauma. So, yeah, and distress, right? So that we have to begin to look at, when you circle up, begin to think of ways that you can strategize together to put things in place and where the sources are, so that as we begin to identify who needs support in our circles, or our families, our communities, that we can also begin to identify what we can do to support them or who may have those skills. And not just me and Samsara, right? You know, or this sister there, but that we begin to broaden our network in that way. And one way might be that you come together like this, and I think this might be one of the teachings of this evening, right? That you come together like this and figure out how to keep this going in a way that is supportive of the work and the women doing the work together.
That's another important piece too. It's also the community deciding that birth workers are important and valuable, and that birth workers need to be supported, and that families need to be supported. You know, that we might have to inconvenience ourselves a little bit, and to even evolve beyond thinking it's an inconvenience. I saw a hand. Leslie.
Hi, sis. You said something that just really resonated with me about nature and having to be out there and feel the sun and the water and the earth. And I have always been a nature lover, you know, even though I'm just an urban dweller like so many people that, you know, didn't grow up in the country or whatever, but just so drawn to nature.
City girl.
Yeah. And so I just wish that, I mean, I've always wished for a long time that there was some kind of, you know, program that would really get our youth out there. You know, I've taken some of my friends' children out just to the trails up in the Oakland Hills, and it's the first time they've been here. They didn't even know they were there. And that is one of the most serene places that you can be, right inside the city, you know. And I just wish that there was some kind of way that we could really incorporate that, like on a weekly basis. Daily. If not daily.
Well, Taisha, you can always come work with Malcolm X grassroots movements and help us organize the New African Scouts. And certainly has worked to take the children out into nature at least twice a year. Then there's also Leadership Excellence, who takes the youth out. And they have what I call Trauma 101, which we can talk more in depth about. You're right, nature is an important part of our healing process and the trauma healing process, and even the intergenerational trauma healing process. I know I came up and the elders would take the whole family camping, right? And so we could, and taught us how to make campfires, and my grandfather taught us how to clean a gun, because they were still hunting animals. They got a lot of their meat during the year by hunting. And so, and those are just some of the skills that I learned, right? And then as a group of people working together, we did take ourselves out into nature, right? So everybody knew how to, do they call it pitch a tent?
Yeah.
Yeah, and make fire and cook outside, and we had our plant healing walks, and it doesn't have to be far. You know, you have Chabot Park. I know that Tilden has family and group camping areas, and you don't even have to camp, right? You can actually just make those timed to walk, buy an herb book, and have the children help identify some of the plants, right? There are any number of ways. When I used to just take my children up to UC Berkeley in that little redwood circle, have them walk through UC Berkeley, if nothing else, or up to Lake Temescal after school and sit down and eat on the grass. So even though those are small things, with consistency, they have a way of helping change the level of how we're vibrating in the city and how we're awakening in that vibration, and teaching them to listen to the voice of the birds, and pay attention to the formations of the clouds, and how the earth feels, and it could become life-saving at some point. But we also, as city dwellers, don't want to lose those teachings, right? We want to extend them on into the generations.
So, Molly, with you. When I was coming up, a little brown girl in Brooklyn, there was always the woman in the neighborhood that would gather up all the kids.
I was one of them.
No, I became one of those when I grew up. Like, there was always the woman that would have everybody else's kids in her house and would take them all over the place. And back before we were worrying about having everybody in seatbelts, she like had 20 kids in the car. And magically nothing happened to anybody. And they went all around town, and mothers could work or get things done on Saturday afternoons because there was the mama somebody in the community who would just take all the babies. And I really want to encourage everybody to be one of those women or men. Be those people who are, as opposed to like criticizing the neighbors because their kids are running wild or doing whatever, be the person who takes everybody to the park. And it doesn't even, Mosswood is, just a few blocks away from here. It's a beautiful park, and if you go looking around there, there's all kinds of wonderful things growing, plantain and whatnot. You can show the kids what it's good for.
Laying on the grass and just looking
Laying
at the
on,
sky.
just laying around and looking for ladybugs, and there's so much. And it always comes back to the choices that we make and the difficulty of those choices within this society that books every little second of our time, mostly in foolishness. So it's about, okay, whether we're going to make that decision on a one-on-one level to, I'm going to say this because everybody knows what a Facebook addict I am, but it's like Facebook or time in the sun with my granddaughter. Time in the sun with my granddaughter is going to win, even though I am definitely a Facebook addict. But for each one of us, that choice looks differently, right? So if we all did that, we would see a quantum change, and the children would be so appreciative. Because the bad press about millennials is that they don't care about their elders. I hear that all the time. But that's not what I hear from millennials.
It's not.
What I hear from millennials all the time is how can I find an elder? I want elders, and I don't want my elder to be my girlfriend. I got girlfriends. And so we need to turn off the media that tells us these lies that our children don't need us. And that happens. The baby's in the mother's body, and the society is telling them that there's no need or connection that's going on there in the pregnancy even. The baby is born, and we want to put the baby down the hall away from the mother, when the baby is yearning for its mother and may die simply because it's not in its mother's arms. It's in a crib down the hall all by itself. That's what crib death is. So we have to fight that, whatever voice that tells us that we're not enough for ourselves and we're not enough for our families, we're not enough for our partners, we need some product or some corporation to co-sign our existence. We really need to push back on that, to give us the strength to take the steps that we're talking about. Amen. And then you and then you.
Well, thank you for your work and your love and your dedication to justice. My name is Jesselyn, and I'm apprenticing with Samsara. So I've been really, really blessed and lucky in my life in that the first decade of my childhood was spent in a communal, collective, anarchist educational setting. I was raised in an organic home. I've been given many blessings in that sense, and coming out to the Bay Area was like, oh, I'm gonna see how they're doing out on the West Coast, but I'm feeling a lot of that millennials and also full-grown people who are done raising their children in the process of waking up to these things right now, particularly my male peers also, and I'm seeing a lot of angst and jadedness and bitterness, and this like you said, this desire, this yearning to connect with their ancestry, their lineages, their lessons, their elders, But one of the ways I see it expressed the most is like, I gotta get out of here and go live in the woods by myself because people are really feeling the toxicity of society. And I do what I can to share what I've learned, and I do what I can to be a resource. But my question kind of is, for those people who are feeling jaded but also feeling that yearning, and because we are so connected to using the internet as a tool, I'm wondering if there's one voice or one author or one resource or one website that you would point someone to start on that path of, okay, I see I have wounds, I'm healing, I'm waking up, this hurts, like where do I start? And I have so many, oh, try this, read this book, check this out, but especially with internet addicted people, it's really hard to get somebody to focus on really going deep into a lesson or an author or a book. And I'm just wondering, for people who are coming from a more mainstream context, like if you had a suggestion for the first direction to point them in, I'm wondering if you would have any, because I would love to be able to, say a gift of start here and see where it takes you.
Well, let me say something quick, and then Mama has something to say for sure. Firstly, I think the first step is some good therapy.
Yeah.
No joke.
Yeah.
No joke. That knowing who you are, addressing your wounds and healing your trauma, therapy, in my belief, is the first step. Now, I'm a spiritual and religious person, and I think that that's very important too. So we want to do those simultaneously. If you're not a spiritual or religious person, start with therapy and see what happens, because that might get ignited in you. And then look at your lineage to see where the spirituality and the richness of that, deduct any and all taint of patriarchy and move forward. Where are your people? Who are your people? What has happened to me in this present life? How do I heal that? And then how do I reconnect with my people before us? We're living seven generations behind and providing for 7 generations ahead. So we need to know our own lineage, know them, love them, heal them, forgive them. Because as we heal them as well. And then we create that in richness so that the people ahead of us will have a better time. I don't think it's ever been a walk in the park to be a human being. But I think that definitely is harder when you don't have that prior strength to draw from in the present day. In the sweetest of households, there's some level of trauma that we need to address, forgive, and heal. So we're going to start there, and then everything else gets easier. Because the serendipity puts the right book in your hand. The serendipity, which I call God, sends you to the right workshop, has you meet the right sister on the bus who tells you exactly what you needed to hear that day.
All the time.
All the
It
time.
happens to me all the time, I hear that.
Well, some of the things we haven't talked about are our daily practices, right? And so I certainly strive to meditate every day, and started at a young age, which is began the conscious meditation, yoga practice, when I was able to running and dancing as my physical activity. But we need to do those on a regular basis, right? Eat well, meditate, move, and spend time in nature and with loved ones, and then sacred sexuality as well, which we often don't talk about. So books, it would just depend on who the person was. It really would, for young woman of African descent, Queen Afua's Sacred Woman is a really great book to start with. Ayanna Van Zandt, Tapping the Power Within, is like a little beginner primer. I began to learn about nutrition from Dick Gregory's book, Cooking with Mother Nature. And so each one is, it's different for each one of us. Jeannie Rose's Natural Body book for the, it's just so different. What is our bodies, ourselves,
That's a
the
good
natural birth book, and I feel like I'm here talking to the choir. I do, that's why I haven't gotten into a lot of detail around, the intricacies of the systems of oppression that we're dealing with, because I think we're all here pretty aware of those intricacies, right? But you might even look at creating your own book, for millennials, right? Because you sound to me that you already have a great deal of knowledge and information. And that in compiling the book, you might even be able to turn that into wisdom. Though I do think wisdom comes with life practice, but you sound like you have lots of life practice behind you. Or maybe you and Davina get together and write a book together. I'm serious. Or a periodical, right? Something like that. A blog. But you were saying actually written word, right?
Well,
Or on an ebook. It doesn't have
it
to
doesn't
be
matter, it's
paper.
just for people from that more mainstream context who are searching for a resource.
Searching for
An
fast
online
food.
magazine. If it's not there, and you're looking for it, it probably means that you are either to inspire someone to create it or to create it yourself.
So Molly had a statement and then we have to stop after that, so the food's getting cold.
So, question for me, is your experience, we're talking about trauma and healing, and I'm really interested in how protest works with this, where, how do we go clearly to a protest when we are wounded and need healing, and therefore make an outward statement that what does it take actually to be very clear about what we should protest and how and what we should do.
I don't know if there's an answer to that question, because I don't think you can be alive in the United States without having some level of trauma and being consistently traumatized. I think it's almost impossible just driving the protest. You may have meditated an hour, which I do, right? I would take my sacred baths and then on the way get cut off or have someone treat you really disrespectfully, and then activate some old wounds. So it's a consistent process, I think, for all of us. I don't know anyone, haven't known anyone who hasn't been damaged in some way, shape, or form by what's in place right now, right? And historically, as far back as recorded history, that we've been being taught that trauma exists, and that there were systems in place to strive to heal that trauma, whether it be the story of Asara and Aset, and or Isis and Osiris and that healing, or Cain and Abel, the whole thing, right? So, protests. I was listening to one of the sisters from Black Lives Matter last week saying, sometimes we plan it based on one thing, and sometimes it's Tuesday and we just feel like banging, right? And we'll just go bang. I don't know if you have to have a specific frame of mind to go on a protest. I think for myself, I'm more of a strategic planning person, so I believe in visioning and having long-term planning. So protests to me, they work for short-term planning. So I think there's two ways of dealing with how to create change and transformation on the planet. I'd really encourage you to circle up and do some really long-term 7-generational planning. I remember one thing that inspired people in our community was the Million Man March, right? a lot of those men that went to the Million Man March came back with and began to create long-term plans, which I can still see the results of, like the African American Male Achievement in the Oakland schools. I mean, just different results of that. Tommy Smith track meets that came out of the 100 Black men, as well as what we're doing with the State of Black Oakland, right? The People's Assembly that we're forming to